Hello and welcome back. In this video, we'll continue with MDebug Edge microservice and specifically talk about the two APIs we did not cover in the first video. If you have not watched the previous video, we highly recommend that you watch now before watching this. A link to the first MDebug video where we deployed the Edge microservice and look at all the devices in our Edge clusters will be in the description. Now let's get started with the video and talk about get info and put token. In this video, by the end of it, you'll learn how to call MDebug get info and put token using the GUI that we used in the first video. You will be able to recall the 4 different options for get info and explain what they do, and you will be able to describe the purpose of a supernode. Okay, now let's go and talk about the supernode. Before we go into the GUI, let's first talk about what a supernode is. One of the main goals of edgeEngine is to efficiently discover other edgeEngine enabled devices and have them communicate directly regardless of what cluster they may reside in. One of the main purposes of a supernode is to collect all the information about every edge node in a local network cluster. It holds this knowledge and the status of every edge node, so when a device needs to communicate with a certain device in a cluster, instead of broadcasting a message asking for every device and getting multiple different responses from every active edge node, the device will ask the supernode of the local cluster, and the supernode will return the reachability information of the device or devices the caller is asking for. A supernode is chosen by an election process conducted by every edge node. Essentially, a device with the best hardware and software capabilities oftentimes will be elected to be the supernode. Let's look at some diagrams to further explain what a supernode is. Traditionally, when one device wants to communicate with another device, they will utilize the cloud. A device will ask the cloud to be connected to another device with an ID or a certain name. The cloud will go then look for that device, but the problem with this is that it will get thousands of responses back. All the other devices where it searched for that device for will also send back responses, letting the device know that they are up and running. The cloud has to process all of these responses and look for that device that the original caller asked for. Once that device is found, it will connect the 2 devices and they will begin to communicate. With Mimik, we have devices in clusters. When one device wants to communicate with another device in another cluster, even before they have asked to be connected to that device, a few things happen when edge nodes are all on the same local network cluster. So, when all these edge nodes are on the same cluster, they will begin to elect a supernode. When a supernode is elected, all of the devices on that local cluster will register to that supernode. This then, when a device wants to communicate with a device on another cluster, that device will ask the supernode, hey, will you connect me to this device? Similarly that you saw in the previous examples where the device talked to the cloud to do this. Since the supernode has knowledge of all these devices already, it can connect that device to the device that it was asking for a lot more quicker and efficiently, with less stress on the network and less strain on the cloud on clogging up the bandwidth of the network. So this is the main purpose of the supernode. Now let's take a look at the GUI and see how we can get the supernode information from our local network cluster. Now that we are back in the GUI, I just want to take a quick moment to show you something that you may have missed in the previous video. In the previous video, we talked about get nodes and all the different clusters that you can look into to see the devices that belong into those clusters. In network cluster and in all the others, you may have seen a device that has roles in cluster as supernode linked local network. This means that that device that you're looking at is the supernode, and we can get the information of that supernode quicker by going to get info, selecting type supernode, and pressing send. This will send the supernode information, but this information is exactly the same as the information that you have saw in getNodes when you saw the device with the roles and cluster value being supernode local link network. So again, this is some stuff that you saw earlier in the first video. We have some services that have been deployed, microservices that have been deployed, and other information. So this is what supernode from getInfo returns when you make the call. Let's talk about the next option in getInfo, and that's type my node. This option returns the local node that you are currently on and making the API call from. The details here are very similar to the details we saw in getNodes. Now let's go to the GUI and look at how we can make this call. We are back in the graphical user interface of MDebug where we left off, where we made the supernode call. All we need to do to make the my node call is to uncheck supernode and check my node and press send. This will return the current node that I'm on right now. As a matter of fact, this node also happens to be the supernode because its roles and cluster value is supernode local link network. Let's talk about the last two options in getInfo, which are type my BEP and my SEP. These two endpoints test your edge node to see if it's discoverable and reachable from other devices in either the same or different cluster. Make sure that the status of both these returns successfully to avoid any communication issues with your node. Let's go back to the graphical user interface and see what this looks like. We are back where we left off in the graphical user interface where we saw my node, and similarly to what we did to switch from supernode to my node, we need to uncheck my node, and we'll start off by seeing BEP first. So we'll click on BEP, my BEP, and press send. And we get a status success, meaning that my BEP is good. Now we will uncheck BEP and check my SEP, press send, and we also got status success again. So both my BEP and my SEP returned successfully, meaning my node is discoverable and reachable from other devices in the same cluster or outside the cluster. One more thing to note is that you can check all of these options and press send, but this will just return everything, making it really confusing to see. We suggest that you only do one option at a time to get the clear output that is readable. We have now reached the final endpoint in MDebug graphical user interface, that being PUT token. This endpoint will cache your edge access token. This means that if edge restarts or you quit your browser and restart your browser and go to the graphical user interface, you will not need to provide the edge access token. Just remember that tokens expire roughly within 30 days. Now let's go back to the GUI and look at what this looks like. Now that we're back in the GUI, all we need to do is go to PUT token and see that there's no options. Just make sure that your access token is here in the access token box and press send. You will get success. Now this means that if I were to close the browser and go back to localhost, go to the MDebug GUI, I can input the owner code again, and I can leave it on network or any other call and press send. I will still be able to make the calls without providing the edge access token because I have already cached it. Now that we have reached the end of our video, let's do a quick recap of the things that we covered in this video. Use getInfo type supernode to see the node that has been elected to be the supernode in your network cluster. Remember that the supernode is the knowledge holder of all the edge nodes in your network cluster and is most likely the most capable in terms of hardware and software. The supernode optimizes cross-network, cross-cluster edge node communication. Use getInfo type my node to return edge information about your current node. Use getInfo type MyBep or MySEP to test your edge node's communication with other edge nodes that may reside in the same or different cluster. Use PUT token to cache your edge access token, and remember that edge access tokens expire within 30 days. That wraps up all the APIs for MDebug. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.